The transfer window has been smashed open on Tyneside. I thought we're setting this video up today to talk about the impending transfer of Kieran Trippier to Bayern Munich and what sort of pressure that would relieve financially on Newcastle and what sort of moves they would be able to now make in the final week or so of the window to plug those gaps that they've got in the squad so that Eddie Howe and the team can still mount a European kind of challenge across the table for the remainder of this season. But as we set up to record, we have got breaking news from very credible sources that Miguel Almiron is open to the transfer and Shabab have made their interest known. And that move on top of the Trippier one, as well as some of these squad players we're now starting to see finally be moved on and leave the club. The final week of the window has just got super exciting for Newcastle, with really some apex moneyball transfers being done here. In the video today, we're going to be looking at the repercussions on the Newcastle squad if Trippier stays or if he leaves, and Miguel Almiron the same, and what sort of moves that will allow Newcastle to then push the button on and reinforce their squad with. At any point in the video today, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We're pushing for 10,000 subscribers and we cannot do that without your support, guys. Get into the comment section on this video and let me know, Trippier, Almiron, are they in or they out, and where do Newcastle need to make priority one transfer if and when such moves develop? And let's just get stuck straight into it. Now, I did a video recently where we did the mid-season report card for Newcastle, and this is basically the meaningful body of the squad. There is some other players that are on the books, etc, etc. We're not going to be looking or thinking about them too muoo much today. But with Joe Linton been out until probably around March on top of the Tonali absence, and I think we'll see Pope come back in the next couple of weeks. The absentee list in Newcastle isn't quite as bad as it once was, with Harvey Barnes and Joe Willock being a week or so away. We've also seen Botman come back into the team, and Murphy's back on the scene now as well. So the basic balance we've got in the squad here isn't actually that bad on paper. Now, the move I think where we're all kind of mentally preparing ourselves for with the links to Bayern Munich, it sounds like Trippier's agreed the deal. Everything's been agreed except for the transfer from Newcastle to Bayern. Is it a loan obligation to Bayern? Is it a straight transfer? The finer details no one can quite agree on. But I do feel that Kieran Trippier is probably the #1 target for Bayern Munich. For them being second in the division, they just lost at the weekend. They have to win something. They spent so big on Harry Kane. Their whole squad is very expensive overall, truth be told. And they really need someone of Trippier's ability to come in and try and, make sure that their season doesn't end with a whimper under Thomas Tuchel. So I think that transfer is probably going to happen at some point. And I think a lot of Newcastle fans have kind of mentally thought, okay, the guy's 33. We brought him in for 14 million euros. He's been an absolute leader. He's been an absolute standard bearer at the club. But you're never going to get a better offer. You're never going to find a club in a better position to make you a good offer on a guy that you have already replaced in Tino Livramento. Now, Livramento's been exceptional at left-back whenever I've seen him, of course, and I don't think Dan Burn has got as many admirers at left-back this season as maybe before, but Livramento coming in at right-back is just easy peasy. It's a great kind of passing of the torch almost. I do think it's maybe a wee bit premature. I think you'd like to see Trippier stay at Newcastle a little bit longer, but I say Moneyball-wise, it just makes absolute sense at 33. With the wages he's on, the fee he can command. The fee Newcastle are holding for the moment is 30 to 40 million is what, I hear on all the reports. I'm sure you do as well. But if Newcastle can get 20 to 25 straight cash for this is definitely a move that they should be doing. If it gets under 20, it's a wee bit like, because as Newcastle fans will probably know, being newly anointed experts in FFP, as soon as you sell a player, you get the whole FFP kind of budget back on the books in this kind of accounting period, as it were. But when you buy players, it gets amortized, or however you say the word, over the length of their contract. So if you sell Trippier for 20, 25 million, and then you can go and buy 4 players that maybe their amortization is only going to be 25 million for the remainder of this accounting period. The accounting period goes in 3-year windows. I'm not too sure where we are exactly in the window, but that 25 million you would get for Trippier could be used, for example, across 3 players. So let's imagine Trippier does go to Bayern Munich in the next couple of days and Newcastle will get something like that, and where they've got a bit of budget to move around for some players that maybe over a 3 or 4 year contract would be around the £30 million mark. There's also been some relentless links to Jamal Lascelles, if I can say that properly, and the links have resurfaced again, I'm told, to Besiktas. So, along with Manquillo, some of these quieter, and I know there's a lot of efforts to try and get Ryan Fraser off the books as well, but some of these squad players that do command significant Premier League wages that aren't making an actual impact into the squad, it makes so much sense to get them moved on. So, if maybe something like that happens as well, maybe Burn is now thought of as maybe the first choice left back for the remainder of this season, but also the first choice backup centre back, allowing Hall perhaps some more opportunities to start as left back and kind of make that role his own, because Newcastle have committed a significant fee to him. And with top 4 in Champions League been off the cards, I don't think this is a bad opportunity to get Livramento and Hong properly blooded, like Lewis Miley has been at that Premier League level for the remainder of this season, to make sure if they are or they're not going to be, to find out if they're going to be worthy campaigners for next season, because top 4, top 5, whatever it becomes next season for Newcastle is kind of non-negotiable. This season, with a lot of the mitigating factors and the results of the performances that Howe and the team have still managed to get out of the squad, you know, I think you can forgive them for no top 4 this year, of course, but next season that will be a different matter. In midfield, of course, we know Tonali will be back for next season, fully fit and firing and raring to go, and Joelinton will return for the back, you know, the final chapter of the season, as it were. But midfield, with Willett coming back, with Miley becoming a Premier League player, Anderson, I don't know exactly when he comes back from injury, but the overall quality in midfield is really diminished without Joelinton and Tonali in there. And, you know, with the links to Calvin Phillips that emerged earlier in the window, that's obviously gone. It looks like he's away to West Ham. It feels that if Trippier was to go, the first thing Newcastle would have to push the button on is some midfield reinforcements. Now, in these situations, Premier League clubs that are looking to move themselves up the food chain in general after getting an injection of cash or a sustained period of successful player transfers like Brighton and Brentford and, you know, some of these other clubs or whatever, is from within the league, or maybe the Championship in some cases. You know, is there a domestic player that we know won't have that adaptation period, that can play at the level or is local enough or whatever, that we can quickly snap up and very quickly integrate into our team? And when we look at the bottom half of the Premier League table, there is a few, let's say, distressed clubs at the moment. Of course, Everton are the top of everyone's thoughts when you say distressed Premier League club at the moment, with the FFP point deductions that they've already had and maybe more that are incoming. And the number one player when you look at Everton that Newcastle have been linked to and probably should be making moves to sign, whether it be in this window or in the summer, is Onana. Very box-to-box, very versatile midfield. And when we look at the way that Eddie Howe has had his midfield playing, whether it be any combination of 3 with the players that are available or unavailable, is it's been that 8-8 formation. He wants all 3 midfielders going box to box, line to line, covering every inch of the pitch, every blade of grass, tackle every player in the opposition, pass to every player on your team. He wants guys that can do a bit of everything. And Onana has been exceptional in spells for Everton, and Everton have been quite bad, you would imagine. Similar to Anthony Gordon, making that step up to a better squad, he would probably get better results, and he would probably be a great addition into the Newcastle squad. And I think that would be a definite win of a transfer. And economically, I can see why signing Calvin Phillips would put you off if you're also thinking you could get somebody like Onana, who, amortization-wise, if that's how you say it, isn't really that different, because Man City wanted a loan fee of 7 or 8 million quid for Calvin Phillips for 6 months. And I say the way these transfer fees are broken down, that is similar to buying a guy for 40 million quid and spreading it over, or 30 million or whatever, and spreading it over 5 years. Now, it really depends on what Everton's point of view is. Do they still believe that, number one, they can actually, escape relegation? And number two, would selling Onana actually maybe get them out of jail? Would that maybe save them in this current accounting period? Because they've just changed the rules for when things are reported and whatnot, and that's what's brought Everton and Nottingham Forest into this second wave of potential, punishments and whatever. So it really depends on Everton's situation and if they believe that, this Onana transfer just makes absolute sense. It's hard to imagine Everton knocking it back, to be quite honest with you, on a number of levels. But I don't think it's as signed, sealed and delivered as, if you make the phone call, the bid will be accepted, because he's been a big player for them and they are struggling. Staying in the Premier League is still something that they really need to secure. So will they potentially sell their safety? That will cost a few quid. But for me, I think the team that you really want to be trying to, catch in a desperate situation here is Nottingham Forest, who, as we know, when they got promoted into the Premier League, bought like 40 players, and it was obvious that they were going to be breaking FFP restrictions, and they really need a get-out-of-jail-free card. And when you look at Nottingham Forest, there is one player that stands head and shoulders above all else as being suited to Newcastle in a number of different positions. And I'm talking, of course, about Morgan Gibbs-White. Now, Morgan Gibbs-White, for me, could play in this 8-8 midfield that Eddie Howe operates with for the majority of time. But as the likes of Joelinton and Tonali come back, Morgan Gibbs-White is showing his versatility and his quality in the Premier League with Nottingham Forest. And, you know, I've been a big fan of Morgan Gibbs-White for a couple of years. He's had a lot of kind of hype around him when he was breaking through at Wolves. And I don't really know what it was, but he never really broke through as early as a lot of people thought he might. But I think this year he's been really, and, you know, last year I suppose as well, in spells, undeniably Premier League quality. But in midfield, I think he would do a fantastic job for Newcastle. But also, if Almiron was to leave for Al-Shabab, he's not got that undeniable pace that Almiron has, but he could definitely, you know, he can definitely fill in the front three positions for rotation relief and, you know, different tactics against different opposition and whatever. And I think he would just gel into this squad extremely well. He's obviously a homegrown player as well. So once you get into the European, you know, squad registrations and all that kind of thing, along with the likes of Livramento and Hall and Barnes and Gordon, there's a great nucleus of homegrown players that gives Newcastle a lot of freedom with the remainder, you know, with the remaining pieces of their squad. So I think Morgan Gibbs-White would be the #1 transfer. If I was going to try and pick a pocket of another Premier League club in this January window, or even in the summer if it wasn't possible in January, looking again at the Premier League table, I do think that Crystal Palace do have some assets, but the thing with Palace is a lot, you know, Eze, Olise, these guys have got a lot of big clubs that will pay a lot bigger fees than maybe Newcastle are able to at the moment, circling around them. And do you know, when I look at Wolves and we think about that undeniable pace that Almiron brings, I think Hwang Hee-chan would be probably the best doppelganger kind of replacement for Almiron you could certainly find from within the Premier League. In Europe, I suppose there's probably a bit of a conversation for that, but a guy that has got an incredible engine, loves the mega press and attack, and can cover all sorts of ground in transition and counter-attack very effectively, as we've seen from Wolves. I've heard Gary O'Neill talk about FFP restrictions. Wolves are a team that have been forever spending big for the last, like, it feels like 10 years at this point, and he's probably wanting to redevelop the squad ever so slightly. Cunha's been a key player. Pedro Neto's probably their best player, so Hwang is probably one of their best players as well, don't get me wrong, but, like, he could get, you know, Newcastle, you guys would probably pay quite a lot of money. Probably a lot more money for Hwang. He'd probably fit the team a lot better than a Pedro Neto. Now, I can't get an accurate read at the moment on what the suspected transfer fee for Almiron is, but, you know, I think if both of those players go, you could probably make an argument that Newcastle could complete all three of these transfers if they were slick enough. Obviously, time is against them, and, you know, the selling clubs would be motivated enough to make it happen. Any one of these three, I think, would make an incredible difference to the Newcastle best 11, their squad for this year and beyond this season. Like I mentioned, you know, especially Morgan Gibbs-White, you know, they can really add to the squad for the foreseeable future. With a lot of them being very young, the prime of their career, and Premier League proven, there's not really a bad transfer between the three of them. But as ever, Newcastle probably will need to go into the continent and be a little bit cuter, be a little bit clever, and maybe unearth some gems. Alexander Isak at the time was a big risk. Bruno Guimaraes and Sven Botman, I think, were more, you know, kind of proven articles when they showed up. But I do think they might need to take a little bit more of a risk because the transfer pressure, you know, the transfer fee pressure, etc., that they have on them is a bit greater. Now, Matias is one of the Argentinian wonder kids that's been taking Serie A by storm. The Frosinone forward on loan from Juventus has been incredible this year. He's been very effective in front of goal. These are his ratings out of 100. As you can see, he's getting lots of goals and assists across the season, but even in the games where he doesn't, he's a very worthwhile contributor in attack, trying to get into the box, create opportunities for him and his teammates. And for the couple of times I've seen Frosinone, he really does catch the eye. Juventus themselves are always under financial pressure to be selling some of these kids into the transfer market so they can go and get some other players themselves, because Juventus like to waste a lot of money, as I'm sure you're aware. And this guy, I think, would be really good. He could do well in the Premier League. I've not seen enough of him. I don't think there's been enough of him at the elite level of European football for him to be like a credible, outstanding candidate in this window. I'd probably like to see him play the rest of the season at Frosinone and see him keep up this form before I would link him to the likes of Newcastle. And Newcastle have been linked to another Brazilian midfielder they were going to try and sign from the continent, and it is the famously named Ederson at Atalanta. Now, this guy at 24 years of age has got a lot of minutes under his belt at a very high level of the game. He's been playing for in Serie A for a little while, obviously more notably with Atalanta, but previously with Salernitana, making 15 appearances, 2 goals and an assist. And before that, a very strong career in Brazil with the likes of Cruzeiro, Corinthians and Fortaleza, who have been pretty decent more recently. And this guy is an all-action midfielder. He goes box to box. He's getting goals and assists, but not just that. Tackles, interceptions. He's a defensive powerhouse as well for Atalanta, who are a very open, attacking team. Quite similar to Newcastle in the sense of like when they attack, they want to throw their fullbacks. They want to throw their midfield into action as well. And this is a guy that does both sides of the game in an elite league to a very elite level, it must be said. And a guy like him, Brazilian as well, he's going to link up obviously with Bruno and Joelinton, you'd imagine, pretty well as well. And coming from Atalanta, you know, the transfer fee doesn't need to be the same levels as it would for the likes of an Onana or a Morgan Gibbs-White. But that's more in the lines of an Alexander Isak, someone that's got the minutes, have proven themselves in a good situation in a good league. And if you bring them into a good team in the right situation, you've scouted them well, I think this could be a hit of a transfer. There's been some very tenuous links coming up from Manu Kone as well, who was making a lot of headlines last season and was linked to a spectacular transfer to perhaps Liverpool or something like that. A box-to-box, energetic, young French midfielder who Mönchengladbach have been pretty minced, to be honest with you, for the last 2 years. He's just come back from a pretty serious injury and he's starting to get back on his feet. He's not done anything that incredible really this year. As you can see, his last game was probably his best, scoring 58 out of 100. A huge defensive performance here, a lot of tackles, a lot of possession won as well, a lot of duels completed, and some good passing into the final third. Again, a real triple A, a real box-to-box midfielder that would fit Eddie Howe really well. But I do think this guy would command a significant transfer fee, and I don't think this is a January transfer, sadly. Now, I said it in the Newcastle mid-season report card, but I think plundering Paris Saint-Germain would be a very smart move. Now, Hugo Ekitike could have been a good replacement for Alexander Isak. He's away to Frankfurt now. It feels like that move is all but done at this point. But I would love to see Newcastle go to Paris and pick up King Carlos Soler and bring him to Tyneside. This guy's maybe not quite got the same energy box to box as maybe even a Lewis Miley offers or a few other guys. Very energetic, very box to box. As you can see, not been featuring very regularly for Paris. But when he was in Spain, and when he does play for Spain national team as well, he is a great centre mid, a fantastic playmaker. And for me, a lot of the Spanish La Liga, these elite players, they do very well in the Premier League. And a lot of clubs, when they are building themselves up, like Newcastle are, have signed a lot of very successful Spanish playmakers to come in and really help make the midfield have an identity in attack. And I think Carlos Soler is on the transfer window, has been available. PSG are open to offers, transfer, loan, all sorts of stuff. And I think this is a guy that would be a great addition to the Premier League. Would be a very cute transfer as well for Newcastle. It's not really one that a lot of clubs are sniffing around. And, the chances of success, the odds are I think are very, very high. Now, if Newcastle were to take a bit of a punt from the continent, I've been really impressed this season, intermittently when he's played, by Luis Enrique here of Real Betis. Now, if starred against Barcelona at the weekend, if you maybe caught that game, it was an action-packed one. Very talented winger, as you can see, doesn't play regularly enough to really have made a name for himself yet in Europe. But Brazilian team Flamengo are trying to get him back. They want him to play regular football. He wants to play regular football. And, if Flamengo are in the hunt for him, the transfer fee's probably not that mad. That's a bit of a punt, but it's a name I thought I would give these. But the biggest transfer that Newcastle have been linked to quite continuously for the last couple of weeks, it's caught a lot of headlines, of course, is Joshua Kimmich. The best centre midfielder probably in world football, by all accounts statistically. He just dominates the ball, wins he does everything, man. And it doesn't seem like this move has been absolutely quashed and has been written off entirely. I think Joshua Kimmich is a transfer that if Newcastle have got any opportunity of doing, should be doing. There's no chance it's going to happen in January. So if it was going to happen in the summer, you need to leave the squad space for somebody like Joshua Kimmich, as well as the financial ability to make the deal happen. Pay him the mega money. You'll need to pay this guy De Bruyne levels. You'll need to pay an obscene transfer fee. But if you could get Joshua Kimmich into this Newcastle team, they should be making sure they can leave that window open. Because if Kimmich was to play, he'd be playing probably in this position that Bruno has been favoured in. I think that's a great thing, because if you can get Bruno to be a bit more attacking and get into the box a bit more, I think you get a lot more out of him. And having Kimmich in there is just wow, could you wish for anyone better in world football in today's age, in this day and age? When the likes of Tonali and Joelinton come back, it just makes this team Champions League level, really at the highest order. So I think that's a move that you should definitely be keeping yourself open to. But it does then mean the gaps that we maybe fill for Newcastle in the January window, maybe the loan transfer does make a bit more sense. Or can you have a replacement situation, maybe like that Ederson transfer we mentioned, where maybe then in this, in the summer or a future window, maybe you do need to sell Bruno for 120 million to some Real Madrid or Man City or, you know, whatever it might be, and you've already got then the quality in the squad to, you know, then losing Bruno isn't as big of a problem. I don't know. So there's a few kind of if, buts, and maybes, a few different sliding door opportunities here with even the. I say it's a rumour, you know, but I thought I would mention it in the video because it would feel rude to not to. I hope you've enjoyed this one, guys. I'm looking forward to catching the comments on this one. On screen now is the mid-season report card I did for Newcastle, as well as something else that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this one. Check out the report card if you haven't yet. I had a lot of fun making it. And let me know on that one what you think Newcastle's season, what does success look like. And I'll catch you on the next one.